Multi-talented Judy Garland was a singer, dancer, and actress who is best remembered for her role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Other defining moments in her acting career included the films Meet Me in St. Louis and Summer Stock. Despite her success, she lived a troubled life full of personal and financial problems. She died of a drug overdose at the age of 47. In this video, we go through her final years. In 1963, Garland sued Sidney Luft for divorce on the grounds of mental cruelty. She also asserted that he had repeatedly struck her while he was drinking and that he had attempted to take their children from her by force. She had filed for divorce from Luft on several previous occasions, even as early as 1956, but they had reconciled each time. Mickey Deans and Garland at their London wedding in March 1969, 3 months before her death. After her television series was cancelled, Garland returned to work on the stage. She returned to the London Palladium, performing with 18-year-old daughter Liza Minnelli in November 1964. The concert was also shown on the British television network ITV, and it was one of her final appearances at the venue. She made guest appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show and The Tonight Show. Garland guest-hosted an episode of The Hollywood Palace with Vic Damone. She was invited back for a second episode in 1966 with Van Johnson as her guest. Problems with Garland's behavior ended her Hollywood Palace guest appearances. A 1964 tour of Australia ended badly. Garland's first 2 concerts in Sydney were held in the Sydney Stadium because no concert hall could accommodate the overflow crowds who wanted to see her. Both went well and received positive reviews. Her third performance, in Melbourne, started an hour late. The crowd of 7,000 was angered by her tardiness and believed that she was drunk. They booed and heckled her, and she fled the stage after 45 minutes. She later characterized the Melbourne crowd as brutish. Garland's Melbourne appearance gained a negative press response. Garland's tour promoter Mark Herron announced that they had married aboard a freighter off the coast of Hong Kong. However, she was not officially divorced from Luft at the time the ceremony was performed. The divorce became final on May 19, 1965, and she and Herron did not legally marry until November 14, 1965. They separated 5 months later. During their divorce, Garland testified that Herron had beaten her. Herron claimed that he only hit her in self-defense. For much of her career throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, her husband, Sidney Luft, had been her manager. However, Garland eventually parted ways with Luft professionally, signing with agents Freddie Fields and David Begelman. By the fall of 1966, Garland had also parted ways with Fields and Begelman. Fields's and Begelman's mismanagement of Garland's money, as well as their embezzlement of much of her earnings, resulted in her owing around $500,000 in total in personal debts and in debts to the IRS. The IRS placed tax liens on her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles, her recording contract with Capitol Records, and any other business dealings in which she could derive an income. Garland was left in a desperate situation that saw her sell her Brentwood home at a price far below its value. She was then cast in February 1967 in the role of Helen Lawson in Valley of the Dolls by 20th Century Fox. According to co-star Patty Duke, Garland was treated poorly by director Mark Robson on the set of Valley of the Dolls, and was primarily hired so as to augment publicity for the film. After Garland's dismissal from the film, author Jacqueline Susann said in the 1967 television documentary, Jacqueline Susann and the Valley of the Dolls, "I think Judy will always come back. She kids about making a lot of comebacks, but I think Judy has a kind of a thing where she has to get to the bottom of the rope, and things have to get very rough for her. Then with an amazing inner strength that only comes of a certain genius, she comes back bigger than ever." Returning to the stage, Garland made one of her last U.S. appearances at New York's Palace Theater in July 1967, a 27-show stand, performing with her children Lorna and Joey Luft. She wore a sequin pantsuit on stage for this tour, which was part of the original wardrobe for her character in Valley of the Dolls. Garland earned more than $200,000 from her final run at New York's Palace Theater from her 75% share of the profits generated by her engagement there. On the closing night at the Palace, federal tax agents seized the majority of her earnings. By early 1969, Garland's health had deteriorated. She performed in London at the Talk of the Town nightclub for a 5-week run in which she was paid £2,500 per week, and made her last concert appearance in Copenhagen in March 1969. After her divorce from Heron had been finalized on February 11, she married her fifth and final husband, nightclub manager Mickey Deans, at Chelsea Register Office, London, on March 15. On June 22, 1969, Garland was found dead in the bathroom of her rented house in Cadogan Lane, Belgravia, London. At the inquest, coroner Gavin Thurston stated that the cause of death was an incautious self-overdosage of barbiturates. Her blood contained the equivalent of 10 1.5 grain, 97 milligrams, seconal capsules. Thurston stressed that the overdose had been unintentional, and no evidence suggested that she had committed suicide. Garland's autopsy showed no inflammation of her stomach lining and no drug residue in her stomach, which indicated that the drug had been ingested over a long period of time rather than in a single dose. Her death certificate stated that her death was accidental. Supporting the accidental cause, Garland's physician noted that a prescription of 25 barbiturate pills was found by her bedside half empty and another bottle of 100 barbiturate pills was still unopened. A British specialist who had attended Garland's autopsy stated that she had nevertheless been living on borrowed time owing to cirrhosis, although a second autopsy conducted later reported no evidence of alcoholism or cirrhosis. Her Wizard of Oz co-star Ray Bolger commented at her funeral, "She just plain wore out." Forensic pathologist Jason Payne-James believed that Garland had an eating disorder. Psychologist Linda Papadopoulos asserted that it was probably bulimia nervosa, which contributed to her death. After Garland's body had been embalmed and clothed in the same gray silk gown she wore at her wedding to Deans, Deans traveled with her remains to New York City on June 26, where an estimated 20,000 people lined up to pay their respects at the Frank E. Campbell Funeral Chapel in Manhattan, which remained open all night long to accommodate the overflowing crowd. On June 27, James Mason gave a eulogy at the funeral, an Episcopal service led by the Reverend Peter Delaney of St. Marylebone Parish Church, London, who had officiated at her marriage to Deans 3 months earlier. Judy's great gift, Mason said in his eulogy, was that she could wring tears out of hearts of rock. She gave so richly and so generously that there was no currency in which to repay her. The public and press were barred. She was interred in a crypt in the community mausoleum at Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York, a town 24 miles (39 kilometers) north of Midtown Manhattan. Upon Garland's death, despite having earned millions during her career, her estate came to $40,000, equivalent to $220,000 in 2020. Years of mismanagement of her financial affairs by her representatives and staff, along with her generosity toward her family and various causes, resulted in her poor financial situation at the end of her life. In her last will, signed and sealed in early 1961, Garland made many generous bequests that could not be fulfilled because her estate had been in debt for many years. Her daughter, Liza Minnelli, worked to pay off her mother's debts with the help of family friend Frank Sinatra. In 1978, a selection of Garland's personal items was auctioned off by her ex-husband Sidney Luft with the support of their daughter Lorna Luft and their son Joey. Almost 500 items, ranging from copper cookware to musical arrangements, were offered for sale. The auction raised $250,000, equivalent to $790,000 in 2020, for her heirs. At the request of her children, Garland's remains were disinterred from Ferncliff Cemetery in January 2017 and reinterred 2,800 miles (4,500 kilometers) across the country at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Los Angeles. What are your thoughts? Please leave a comment below this video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.